Here we go. Yes, I got that. Firstly, can I just acknowledge the traditional owners of all the lands that we're meeting on and pay my respects to them. And also just keep in mind, this is a half-hour session, so I'm not going to waffle on too long. It'll be 20 minutes and then 10 minutes time for questions.
Okay, just a moment, Rita.
So and also perhaps what you'd like to do is just in the chat, put your name and organisation you're from, because we don't have time to go through introductions. It'll just be handy for us to know who's who. And you'll be able to put questions in the chat if you would like as well. So can I introduce Freyja Dixon from Kensington Neighbourhood House. She's going to talk about transforming a primary school, the Debney Meadows Community Hub. And when we're talking about community hubs in primary schools, it's a growing movement across Australia, and it recognises the need for holistic wraparound support for disadvantaged families. So we're very interested to hear about this, Freyja, so I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Sure thing. Thanks, David. It's great to be here and sharing. I mean, one of Joe from Farnham Street Neighbourhood Learning Centre is one of our key partners as well in this project. So it's wonderful to have her joining. Also want to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land, the Wurundjeri people, and recognise elders past, present and emerging. And also just say that hubs like what we're working on with migrant and refugee communities are a fantastic space to share about Indigenous culture. And we've actually been working closely with the Wurundjeri Council on a few different initiatives where they've come in to work with the students and the parents around the traditional learnings. And it's just fantastic because I think there is a lot of our particular African communities really, they just really connect with it. So it is a really important space. I'm going to share my screen now and hopefully that will show all windows. Okay. All right, has that worked? Can everyone see that? Great. Okay, as David said, this presentation is about the Debney Meadows Community Hub, what we've been doing with the primary school, but more specifically around the role that Learn Locals and neighbourhood houses can play in supporting primary schools, particularly schools that are experiencing disadvantage or have disadvantaged communities attending them. So just before we go into the project, just a little bit of background on community hubs in schools. It is a growing movement because there is so much evidence out there that shows the importance of having holistic wraparound support in primary schools. It makes sense. We know it works. Often primary schools are a first point of contact for newly arrived families. And specifically for mothers and women, it's a space where a lot of safety, connection, and confidence building can happen. So having place-based approaches at primary schools is a fantastic way of actually engaging those communities. But specifically, you've got a space at a primary school, predominantly primary schools. I think there are a few being trialled at high schools, but primary schools are a real focus area because early learning is a key area of hubs in schools. But they connect women, also men, but women are, really the focus group of the hubs just because of the way that families are engaging with each other, with the school, through a variety of organisations. And also referring to different programs covering health, settlement support, casework, a whole range of things. They're also really instrumental in supporting the communication between a school and a community. So we know that often that is a barrier for newly arrived families or families with language barriers or other kind of disadvantage barriers which means that they can't access the information the same way, whether that be digital literacy or a variety of things that are preventing that. So hubs have multiple benefits for children, families, services, and the community. They improve connection massively. They also can improve the quality of learning happening in a school and also the learning happening for those adults. Two different models of hubs, which I'm sure many people in this space will have heard of, are Our Place and Community Hubs Australia. So Our Place is sort of a bigger, probably better funded model, which works with schools in terms of bringing in this very holistic approach. There's 8 sites in Victoria. They're looking at high quality learning, health and development, high quality schooling, the wraparound health and wellbeing, engagement and enrichment, and then of course your adult learning, volunteering, learning and employment. Community Hubs Australia, which is the largest movement. I think there's over 100 hubs across the country, but 39 hubs in Victoria. They're really specifically focused on those 4 areas of engagement: early education, English, and vocational pathways. And for anything else, they refer out to other organisations. Okay. So in terms of the hub that we're working on, it's at Debney Meadows Primary School, which is a Flemington primary school in inner Melbourne, in Debney's Park. So we're very close to the Flemington Public Housing Estate. Currently, there are 98 students enrolled in the school, which is actually a massive increase from when we started, when there was only 75. 97% of the school cohort are from a migrant or refugee background, so really high. Most commonly, families are from East Africa, so Somalia, Ethiopia, Sudan, and Eritrea, but from a number of other countries as well. And majority of families do reside in the Flemington or North Melbourne public housing estate. There is a high experience of socioeconomic and structural disadvantage. So these issues have been going on for a number of years, and the school, I would say, is a classic primary school that has experienced a cycle of disadvantage. I'm sure many of us have been reading the Gonski articles that have been coming out, and tell you what, I've been seeing this at this school so much. It's underfunded, under-resourced, a school cohort that needs additional support, additional staffing to really make sure that they're learning to a fulfilled way. But unfortunately, that hasn't really been happening. So what does this mean in terms of the school cohort? There are lower learning outcomes of the students overall. Early learning, so prep starting at the school were significantly behind the average literacy and numeracy rates. There is barriers with parent engagement, support and pathways, so lack of educational experience and confidence, language and employment barriers, and other barriers that mean that parents aren't able to support their kids to the level that they would like to. And of course, it goes without saying that this community was hit particularly hard by the COVID lockdowns, with the hard lockdowns happening in the estates. Even without the hard lockdowns, the impact of those 2 years on education and well-being was huge. Big families living in small apartments, really limited digital literacy, a lot of other housing, economic issues. So I guess there's been a lot of focus on trying to look at how do we catch up? How do we really support families in recovering from that period? So where do we come in? So engagement with the school initially started in 2020 through a homework club. The homework club's not Kensington Neighbourhood House, it's with another organisation that I'm also part of, Edmund Rice Community Refugee Services. And that was kind of one of the first points that we actually started to reach out and kind of see the issues in the school. In 2021, Kensington Neighbourhood House came on board through the delivery of the Family Learning Partnership Program, by sort of a connection that had been made because there was a need for parents to sort of have some English language, specifically around what was going on in school, understanding school processes, compass, the curriculum. From that, it just grew. So we have provided over the last few years adult education courses, women's support groups, employment support, play groups, form support, and food relief. We became aware of the community hub model, and we're sort of like, this is perfect. That's what this school needs. And did reach out and look at the ways that we can kind of make that happen. Unfortunately, funding is limited in certain areas. So we decided to apply ourselves for the William Buckland Foundation, and we were successful in getting a 4-year grant to establish a fully staffed and renovated hub, which was just so exciting because it really, essentially we were delivering a hub before that, but now we had the proper funding to staff, to fix up the space, and to really build the kind of governance structure that we wanted to see to ensure that this space could be sustainable. So moving across, I just want to say here, like, why neighbourhood houses are really well placed to support or lead community hubs. I think it makes so much sense. We have the local partnerships and networks already established. We're not a new organisation coming in trying to build those relationships at everything. We know that. We already have programs and courses running that we can expand over to these new sites. And we already have services and referral pathways ready to go that we can either duplicate or expand these sites. We also have the community development practice and experience that is so important to get these hubs running in a way that is co-founded and run by the local community, which is a really core part of what we're trying to do. So a partnership approach, this is really at the core of what we're doing. I mentioned Joe here, who is part of our hub kind of consortium. We want to build something that acknowledges the local expertise that is surrounding the school. And also in terms of the sustainability side of things, the idea is that the funding that we're getting is really being put towards core staffing and establishing a great governance structure. Partner organisations are coming in and they are funding these different programs. So the idea being that as we move forward, you know, the project isn't just reliant on that grant for program fundings and things to move forward. Even when that funding runs out in 4 years, ideally we'd still have these programs being committed through our partners. And of course, it's great for them because that's another access point for their organisations and agencies. And then from there, some of our community members will go to these different organisations for other support. So we have a steering committee group, and we meet once a term and sort of chat through the governance of the project. It's early days, so just trying to get it all working at the moment. But we, because we had such a strong foundation, we've really been able to hit the ground running. So just want to introduce Amran, who's our dedicated hub coordinator. She's fantastic. She's an experienced community worker, has casework training, multilingual, and has lived experience. So has been able to build trust with the community really quickly, and is just doing a fantastic job in that space. A week in the hub. So speaking of programs and services, it's a busy little space. We've got kids cooking, language programs. We've got 2 ACFI courses. One's ours and one is Farnham Streets. They're both very busy and involve delicious food. Come by sometime. Got book clubs, homework clubs, play groups, and then we have the service side of things. So we have a Wednesday information session with a range of services that come by. We also have housing, employment, health, sort of really starting to set up and work out what that looks like. And then, of course, form support. The women, they are, a pretty magical bunch. And that is really one of the big things that we're doing, is building a space that is that feels really safe for them to connect, share and learn. When I first started working at the school, even once it opened up, parents did not come into the school. They didn't feel comfortable. And a big part of what we were doing is really trying to open that space up so they felt safe and comfortable. We've had, big changes in the school, changes in leadership, changes in, in the hub. And so a lot of that combined work has really led to these women coming in. And as we see that kind of progress, they're taking on more responsibility. They're taking on school council roles. They're taking on volunteering roles in the classroom. And that is really important practical experience that can lead to employment outcomes as well. So our practice and experience, as I said, I think this is a really important thing that neighbourhood houses can bring to this model. We deeply recognise that the appropriate emotional, family, health and wellbeing support are needed for vulnerable families to participate in education. So by trying to bring this all together with our partners, we really think that we will see increased outcomes, like learning outcomes, wellbeing outcomes of the families. We also are really grateful for the opportunity we've had to be part of the Family Learning Partnership Project, because that's further developed our practice and have led other programs grounded in family learning. We wouldn't be able to do what we're doing without a really strong school partnership, and we're very lucky there. But it's taken a lot of work, and it's meant that we're both really getting something out of this space. We're supporting the school community in growing, in strengthening learning outcomes. And of course, for us, it's an amazing new cohort that we have access to support as well. But education in schools is a really specific discipline area. And so again, I think by working together, we can really boost the understanding of community development practice within a school environment, and really try to make sure that these things aren't working in two silos, because education should not sit over here so formalized and community work over here. We have to bring it together as much as possible. So what that kind of looks like is, for instance, like doing some really creative community consultation. Here's some kids sort of doing a mapping exercise about what they would like their school to look like, or their hub to look like, back last year. We've really supported the school to hire locally, boosting the local ownership. So now a lot of the education support workers are hired locally, childcare workers, even their community liaison officer previously worked at Kensington Neighbourhood House. So really providing that training and support, and that helps the school, because they want good staff that also understand the kids, can speak multiple languages, and also strengthens the very community ownership of that school. We do, it's a work in progress, working out the model for the governance and coordination of the hub. But again, bringing those sort of community development principles in is really important. And yeah, working together for shared policies and processes, and how the space will be used after hours and the weekends. So just a few key areas of what we're working on, and what, some of, I guess, the challenges are, is simple things like having so many programs working across a week in one space that's within a school. Obviously trying to work out all of your child safe standards, working out access, entry, multiple staff in a space, who's using the coffee machine at what point, all different things that you've got to think through. But by having a strong partnership arrangement, and one that, ideally in the future will have sort of MOUs in terms of references that really bring this all together so that it can be sustainable, helps in that kind of process. Each program is a piece of the puzzle. So in terms of reporting on, child or adult wellbeing, by information sharing between these programs and between the school, like we've been given access to School Compass, which is where incident reporting happens, which has been a big breakthrough, because previously that wasn't the case. The department aren't required to report on anything outside of the school day. But of course, for a child, Homework Club, Venny, other few programs, they're really pointing to what's happening in a child or adult's life. And it means that we can develop a response that is more accurate for what is going on. So working out that kind of practice is a big part. And then, of course, there's issues around confidentiality, because you've got different information sharing, confidentiality practices for different organizations. So that's a process. But a big part about hubs is that you are trying to minimize the amount of times a family or an individual has to retell their story. And this is such an issue, to different services, different programs, different courses, having to continually share your story. It's exhausting and can be traumatic. So by having, a one-stop shop, where then with permission from a family for that information to then be shared, we can minimize the need for this. David, how am I going for time? I think I've got one slide left. I'll just keep going.
Yeah, keep going. You're fine.
Great.
Sorry.
No worries. I shouldn't have my phone with me. So yeah, just to wrap up, it's a whole community approach, by coming together as a whole group of local organizations around a primary school that we've seen struggling for 30, 40 plus years, and saying, this isn't good enough. We can do better. And these families deserve better than this. We have really been able to support the change in place, and noise is happening. People are getting in contact. Ministers are starting to notice the school, all the right things that need to happen to then get the right capital works funding that this school should have got 50 years ago, to do the improvements and to promote a community that means that they can bring in more families and get more funding and resourcing. So all those things that and actually support that school to grow and strengthen is really happening through a grassroots movement of organizations around that school. And neighbourhood houses are such movers and shakers in that grassroots space. I really do believe that we have a role and we can play a strong role in advocating for hubs in our local area. That's it. So yeah, feel free to jump in with questions and stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Freyja.
No
so please jump in verbally, or if you prefer, put a question in the chat. So we've got a little time to take some questions, so go ahead.
Thanks, Joe.
I was about to say, Joe's impressed.
Well, I think lots of people are impressed. That was a fabulous presentation. It's just amazing. Thank you, Freyja, to kind of give us that background and that understanding of how maybe some communities might get the ball rolling to actually start a community hub, because you can see with all of those examples around the benefits of drawing people in. As you say, it's often the first point of contact, especially for new arrivals to the country or to a community. Same would apply to maybe a regional neighbourhood house or Learn Local. Absolutely. With new people coming into a regional community. So yeah, amazing outcomes, and well done. That was really a great presentation. Thanks.
Thanks, Tamsin. Yeah, and I think even though the hubs have been focused on migrant and refugee communities, the approach applies to any community. And I think should just be part of the schooling system. But I know there's some great hubs that are also working in the Indigenous space as well. But I think, across the board, they could, in like regional, rural towns, absolutely be a really wonderful thing for the community.
Yeah, someone has asked, can we get a copy of the materials used in the presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. Should I just share that with you, David, or?
You can.
Maybe I can upload it here. Let me see.
That would be quick and easy.
Sure.
I think we get David, if we get
Yeah,
the
just because
presentations and the recordings, we can then put them on the. We're going to try and see if we
Share
can
them.
find a site to put them on, or some form of platform so people can see them.
Sure.
Because I'm sure I'd actually like to be able to present some of this to the departmental staff too, because I think as education, sometimes in hearing grassroots stuff, when people are in the centre, they don't always know what's happening at grassroots, and this is a lovely example. So well done.
Thanks, Georgina. Yeah, nice.
I think it's I just love the way that it's layer upon layer building up people's confidence with something that comes in here and it's something there, because it does take time to do that, but just brick by brick, you're just gradually building up their confidence and they're starting to engage in this and that. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just keeps expanding. I mean, one of the programs, so Language for Lunch, which Joe and Farnham Street have been running for, I don't know, Joe, how long has it been running for? Maybe over a year now, 1 year. That started in as cooking, cultural cooking, language development. But obviously it kind of showed there was such an interest in food. And now we have a new sort of ACFI program, which is called Prepare for Work Community Canteen. And so we're working with a group of women around building hospitality skills, pre-employment skills, and they're actually co-designing a new school canteen that will open at the school early next year. It's being trialed at the moment. And so just such, being like not only the skills involved, but there's so much pride, and that's so important for these women. It's a space of confidence building, and then you see that transition to other things, like, as I said, the school council, or building up that that ownership and advocacy ability, because this school should be getting more funding, it should be getting more support, but it does not have a school cohort that has those skills at this point to be able to understand how you advocate for your children in our system.
Yes. I think a few people would like your contact details, Freyja, to talk to you one-on-one about it.
Sure, absolutely. I'll chuck it in.
And I think that's one of the great things about these platforms through the marketplace, because it gives people an opportunity to learn from each other. And I think there's a lot of grassroots good practice examples that could inform policy in the future, because I think some of these are clearly great examples that have actually organically developed, and they are much more effective than sometimes policy that's been done in isolation. So well done.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. It's so nice to have the opportunity to share it as well. It always helps in like consolidating what you've done, actually being forced to put a presentation together. What have we been up to?
And it's an opportunity to celebrate and acknowledge what
not forced.
you've done as providers. Yeah, but also for the participants too, it validates their participation and growth as well.
Yes, it's so nice to have everyone here.
Okay, any more questions? Last call. Okay, well, our timing's pretty good, Freyja. So can we take the opportunity to thank you so much for presenting for us and sharing that beautiful program. As Georgina said, we're going to make the recordings and anything available later on. So look out for that coming through to you. So thank you once again, Freyja.
No worries. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Don't forget there's some more programs coming, so have a look at the program.
That's good.